Morning, everybody. This is the kickoff meeting for the SIG Observability for Crossplane. I'm going to just briefly talk about the purpose of the SIG and then about the agenda items. So cloud platform teams that are using Crossplane to build their cloud platforms will benefit from being able to develop service level objectives, so that they can communicate the value of their platform that they created with Crossplane to their own users. They will also benefit from service level indicators that will allow them to know why things may not meet service level objectives. And then they need further supporting information underneath that. So the purpose of the SIG is to listen to the community and to see what features are people interested in, what will help them, what will help these cloud platform creators, what integrations do they like. So different folks are using different observability tools in order to observe their cloud platforms. And so as part of the SIG, we'd like to learn about which tools do people prefer, and also which methods, right? So there are metrics, or there's tracing, and there are logs, and there are different ways to observe systems. So would be great to hear, what people think in terms of which methods and which combined methods, and how they go about it and how they want to go about it. In terms of contributions, so this is a forum where we can listen to the community, but it's also a forum where community members can contribute to create results that will then benefit the community. So with that, I do have an agenda item. There is a document as part of the invite, and anybody who's joining the SIG for the specific meetings, please add yourselves to the attendees list. Ideally with your email address and your GitHub handle if you have one. So the first item is really the high level I just addressed, which is service level objectives, enabling the creation of service level objectives, and then supporting information. What's the current state and the capabilities? So Crossplane and its providers emit metrics at port 8080/metrics, and the metrics are related to specific areas, like, how deep is my work queue, or how much memory does a certain process use, or what's the how many Go threads are there in a provider, and so forth. There's one metric inside of the every provider that was generated by Upchat, which is a time to readiness for managed resources. And that comes in quite handy, right? Because that's getting closer to enabling cloud platform creators to be able to make sense of, well, what's a baseline? What's a good baseline for certain resource creations against certain clouds and certain cloud providers and in certain regions? And then the users of Crossplane can use those baselines in order to understand, well, what objectives can they derive from that? And what can they actually offer to their downstream users? But there are probably many areas of metrics that are not covered right now that will also be useful. And that's great to surface in this meeting. So with that, I'd like to get into some brainstorming. What do you guys think are useful features that you would like to see?
Hey, Marcus, since it's the three of us, maybe we just is it worth to do a round of introduction on this meeting, or just skip through it and then dive into the like wishful thinking features?
Well, I think it's maybe a good idea to just throw things out that we think are useful, and then we can figure out, well, what's the priority and what makes best sense, and is it something that someone's interested to contribute, or is it something that is super useful, but maybe there's either a mismatch of energy, time, skills, and we can find other avenues to still possibly get the feature created, right? But yeah, if you...
All right, I have quite a few ideas. So the first one is just even with the metrics we have, there's no guidance on how to ingest them from your metrics provider or from Prometheus. And then there's very little guidance on what one should monitor when it comes to those metrics that those providers and the Crossplane itself emits. In addition to that, you just mentioned the CPU, the memory that should be, of course, monitored, but I think there should be guidance on what metrics from the Kubernetes API you should monitor if you use the Kubernetes provider or the Helm provider. And also your cloud provider API hits. We're getting, like, if Crossplane is misbehaving, you want to know how it, what APIs it hits and how much it hits them, so you can monitor that. So you don't, throttling and all that as well.
So here's what I'm hearing, and maybe we can straddle this a little bit. So I have this area here in the document that is ideas brainstorm, right? And then I have a section here which is called proposals. So what I'm really hearing, Christina, is there needs to be a Crossplane observability guidance document, right? Like a document that basically says, what should I monitor, how should I monitor it, and so forth. In fact, from a structure perspective, so I started to create configuration observability repositories, and the plan is to make one overarching one, which is just called configuration observability, and that one can include documents, documentation, guidance, reference links to everything else. And then there is one right now, which is actually, it's called configuration observability Datadog, and it's linked here. There are some links in this document, and the first link is to Datadog integration agent installation. And actually, this repo showcases how you would use Crossplane to install a Datadog agent and then to start monitoring the provider pods and the Crossplane pod and get metric into the Datadog backend. In addition to that, I'm currently working on a repository for open source software. So basically, it's called configuration observability-OSS. It's not public yet. Needs a little bit of refactor, but once it is, then it showcases how to use Crossplane to install Prometheus, Grafana, and how to set up service monitors in a declarative way, and how to then monitor providers and Crossplane through that. And the goal is that anyone who's using Crossplane literally can use that repository. Basically, it contains a configuration package, so it can literally install that configuration package and thereby readily monitor their installation of Crossplane and providers?
And that, sorry, how is it going to be installed?
It's using Crossplane in a composition to install the different parts. So for instance, you would just say kube control apply. Well, actually, even not. You can do it different ways, but you could say install the configuration package, right? That includes the composition for creating the Prometheus operator that then installs Prometheus and creating Grafana and so forth. So literally, you can issue a claim for your observability stack, and it'll create all the dependencies, including the cluster roles and the role bindings and the service monitors and everything you need, so that the cognitive load required from the people who want to monitor their cloud platforms that were created with Crossplane is as low as possible. So they don't need to figure out what's the specific Prometheus configuration they need and so forth. So it's showcased for them, and they could use this configuration package, and then by merit of that, see metrics.
Yeah. I actually do have that. I mean, it's not in Crossplane, it is in Terraform. But I'm one of the maintainers of the Crossplane on EKS repo, and for EKS clusters, that is exactly what this code base is doing. Again, it's in Terraform. It's using the Terraform blueprints, but it does install Prometheus, Grafana, the pod monitor from the Prometheus configuration, and that Grafana dashboard by IT, it imports it as well. So it's like it's a single Terraform apply would just spin everything up. I mean, it would be nicer if it was in Crossplane. I agree.
Yeah, so so let me make a proposal. Coming back to what you started with, because the first thing you said is there's no guidance on how to ingest metrics, right? And so there will be different ways based on different products, right? So Prometheus can scrape things, and or I believe there's actually a Grafana agent that could also, without Prometheus directly ingested. There is the Datadog agent, which
the Datadog, it doesn't, like, you can't do a pod monitor or service monitor with a Datadog agent. I think you got to do the annotations to get the metrics into Datadog.
Yeah, there's a configuration that is specific to Datadog, but also the integration that we have, it can also observe pod annotations. So there are different levels of capabilities for that agent, but depending on the tools used, the ingestion may be slightly different. So I believe it's best documented within that repository for that particular integration, for how that integration is going to ingest the metrics. So let me.
Okay. And right now, because there is a sea of monitoring providers. So right now I hear like we're going to focus on Datadog and Prometheus. Anything else like New Relic, any other vendors you want to cover?
So what I was hoping for is that the community members will guide us on what's most important to them, right? So instead of me saying, hey, we should focus on this particular integration or vendor, I was hoping to hear from people saying, hey, I'm using this tool, but I don't have an integration, right? Or I'm using this way, but I don't have an integration, right? And then we can basically use that to inform us what's a higher priority and so forth. But let me quickly finish this one sentence here. So include a description of how metrics are ingested along with the integration repository. So if the respective Okay, so in terms of integrations, what do you think are widely used tools?
The most common I hear are Prometheus, Datadog, and New Relic. That has been on the metric side.
Yeah, I think that um, we can look into what a New Relic integration could look like, right? Also, I want to dig a little deeper. So for instance, with Datadog, currently we have this integration. However, I believe there's currently no Datadog crossplane provider, which means that you can use the composition to install the agent, but you cannot use the composition to configure your dashboards. So the current repository that is linked here in this document, it does have a folder for dashboard JSON. So you can go into your Datadog account, you can click on, import the dashboard JSON, and then you can just paste it in there. But it's a manual step. And if we had a provider, then we could make it part of the composition. So not only do you get all the metric ingestion and the setup, but you also would get your dashboard setup in your account, and you don't need to do anything manually, which could come in pretty handy later. Because imagine, so the way teams are operating is that the cloud creation teams are enabling their developers, the development teams, to request resources. And ideally, when someone requests a resource, they get the right monitoring set up for it, with it, right? So if I'm saying I claim this Postgres database, and this is a little bit beyond the scope of like core crossplane monitoring, but from a SIG observability perspective, imagine a like seamless built-in capability where when I create a platform with Crossplane and my developers are requesting a database or an EKS cluster or a particular set of resources through a composition, with it, they get the monitoring for these resources and they get the dashboards for these resources. And so they don't need to worry about that. But also it's very pragmatic to the use case, which means when there is no such database, there will be no such dashboard for that database, right? So it's just related to the claimed resources, which would be super nice.
That would be awesome. I would like it's a great North Star in my opinion, but I think to start with, maybe we want to stick with the basics for now and just build a strong foundation, because like day-to operations and monitoring and just even like which metrics to observe is like organizations really struggle with that.
Yeah. So let me ask you another question along those lines in terms of what metrics to observe. When teams start, how do they start? Meaning, are they saying, I want to know how many Go threads are running in this provider? Or are they saying, I want to know whether my resources are created within some baseline of time when someone requests a claim or makes a claim for them?
Yes. So it's more in the lines of, as I mentioned, like everything I say is a problem that an organization has had. That's how I heard it. I'm not just making that up. It's not the wishful thinking. I'm just propagating that information. So when they start, the first thing is monitoring and tuning Crossplane. How is it behaving? It's not the Go. I haven't heard anybody wanting to look at the Go threads. It's usually, is it throttling? Like this thing is slow. So first of all, how slow is it? Like when I'm creating IAM, it is slow. Am I getting STS assume errors? Am I not? I don't know. Why is it so slow? Is it retrying? If my pods are running out of memory and restarting, how do I know that? And how do I size that? In terms of, like, we have 3 toggles when we install Crossplane, the max reconciliation rate, and so on. So how would those affect the memory and CPU consumption, or just pure data, and also load testing? Everybody's like, okay, I installed it on this cluster. How many managed resources can I throw at it? Can I throw 1,000? How about 10,000? Is it going to be okay? How much memory? How much CPU? What do I need to tune? That's like the first question.
Mm-hmm.
And the second question is, if I handed 10,000 resources because all of them need IAM, am I going to throttle the APIs? And how would I know if they're throttling, or why? Like, when things are slow, why are they slow? What is happening? Am I being rate limited? So that's pretty much the first order of business I hear.
Okay.
And then, of course, the queue, like how long is the queue? How fast is it being consumed? That's just in that order.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
APIs, CPU memory, TTRs, and queue is kind of the first 4 that I say we should go to.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that's great input, Christina. Thank you. Welcome, John.
And I'm sorry, but Jonathan, do you have any input on that? You've been really quiet. Like,
I work with Marcus, so I work with Marcus, so same team.
John,
Okay.
welcome. So we've been brainstorming, some ideas because we would like to determine, priorities and what makes best sense. And I wonder if you have any ideas or any asks related to observability that you would like to endorse.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here. I think the one thing that keeps coming up in conversations for me is around metrics and stuff that can be used to monitor the overall health of a control plane. So I guess higher level metrics than what we have right now. Right now, there's lots of low level metrics, but they're data, they're not information. So almost like providing insights into things that are more information than data. That's not a very structured or descriptive answer, but that's the kind of like sentiment that I've been noticing.
Yeah, great. So we just talked about some more low-level things that people are after, that Christina talked about from her experience with different organizations using Crossplane, which included why do things appear to be slow, or is Crossplane waiting on something? How about the reconciliation rate? And so at the high level, it's people are wondering, are there APIs possibly being throttled if there are too many resources, like the cloud provider APIs? How much CPU and memory should a provider pod and or Crossplane be using? What's the queue depth and so forth? And then so your information is also great from it's more high level, like business metrics, but I think we kind of need both, right? So from a higher level perspective, what we discussed earlier was we were talking about service level objectives, enabling cloud platform creators to use or to develop service level objectives, and to have some service level indicators behind that. So in terms of the capabilities, I think, and you have some insight there, John. So I think that based on the metrics we have today, which includes reconciliation errors, which includes work queue depth, which includes memory consumption and so forth, we ought to be able to see how time series of these data looks like when teams observe or wonder about the performance, right? So I wonder, Christina, those teams that have these questions, do they have a dashboard of something or no? And is the absence of the dashboard causing the questions?
So there are two types of questions. So the first one is the absence of guidance of how to get the metrics into a provider, and then the absence of a sample dashboard. Yes, that those two have been lacking. But also, if there is an issue with a particular managed resource, even with what we have today, it is very hard to pinpoint the problem. Let me give you an example. So if Terraform for some reason has a hash and it's recalculating that hash, so it's gonna hit the API and think that resource needs to reconcile every single time. It's gonna hit it about like a little bit over 2,000 times per hour. You can only check that in the events right now. I haven't found a better way to check it per resource. Like, how would we find which resources are misbehaving and to pinpoint that? I have not found some metric that would give it to me right in the.
Yeah, I'm curious. So this particular item, in this case, does Terraform create a new process? Like when it's recalculating the hash, is it creating a new process and leaving the other one there? And so basically the accumulation of processes then causes some resource limitation. Is that the problem you're talking about?
I don't know if it creates a new process. What I know, it's because of I don't know how it calculates the hash, but there are certain resources it does it with. And when it calculates it, it's different than the hash it has. So it detects, okay, there's a difference. So I need to reapply it, even though nothing is changing. It runs Terraform apply because it detects a change every single time.
I see.
And
so basically it's causing possibly like API throttling because it's calling a Terraform apply so often, or how does it manifest itself?
I don't know if it throttles the API, but it does apply. So I don't think it throttles because 2,000 hits per hour is not gonna throttle the API. But it definitely creates noise, and then depends on how many of those you have, it creates noise. So it's not, again, maybe it won't throttle the APIs. However, these will create, especially like on the AWS side, that will go into CloudTrail. It will create a lot of additional logs that then get scanned by your security tools and so on and so on and so on. So even if you have one resource like that, if that resource is used, if you have like a bunch of managed resources, it potentially is going to raise your costs for a lot of things.
Right. Okay. So is the ask to have a metric to determine if Terraform is calling is there an ask for a metric that would indicate the count or the rate for Terraform applies?
We do have metric for Terraform applies. I think it's just, but is it how long the anyhow? I think maybe the events would be a better determination, a count of events, because it can be. I'm just giving you a very particular use case here, but I know if there is too many events per resource that has already been created and ready, something's off, right? I don't know what it would be, but I should go take a look if that's happening.
It sounds like the category of problem you're describing is something is happening abnormally in my control plane, and I don't have an easy way of figuring out what that is. And that's potentially, like, I could imagine you're running a, the CLI saying Crossplane doctor, and it picks up, and can determine based on X criteria things that seem out of the ordinary to to give you some indication of, hey, maybe something is not healthy there or so. But I think the tricky thing is like, what is that baseline criteria look like, and is it the same universally?
Yeah, so again, I'm shooting in the dark looking for guidance, but and I like to work with specific use cases and give examples, but also I want to like be able to zoom out and exactly that, see what else we can do to give more guidance on where the problem is, if there is one. And what I found is, again, with the events, the event count will go up abnormally in the resource.
Maybe there could be an expected event count based on the reconciliation rate and stuff, and if there's a count that's above a certain threshold, it could flag it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so here's I think in terms of what we want to take on as action items. So I hear that there is a basic problem to understand what Crossplane is doing, right? I also understand there is a dashboard that you created, Christina, and then there are some dashboards that we created, and I think what would be a good next step is to make the dashboards a bit more richer, because when the dashboards are richer, then when there are anomalies and we look at the dashboard, we can see things back. Like, for instance, there's something I noticed. I've been playing around with observability for a little bit here, and whenever I create a crossplane, or whenever a crossplane pod just starts and comes up, it creates, for whatever reason, 1,500 Go threads. I don't know what it's exactly doing with them, but it's for a short amount of time. And I didn't know that until I saw the panel in the dashboard saying, oh, this is what you're doing, right? So with richer dashboards, we have an opportunity to actually, when there's a problem, to see, oh, there's something going on here somewhere. So I think that's a first good step. And in the observability channel, I've added some information there. I wonder if you want to take an action item to take your existing dashboard and along the lines of the information to basically increase it so that people who load it can more readily see if there are any outliers.
Sure. Did you mention you did create a different dashboard? You have one? Maybe you can DM me the JSON and then I can combine both.
Yeah, so yeah, and okay, let me here, I take an action item. So Marcus to send Christina dashboard JSON, and then Christina to add info, to add panels to the, yeah, well, we'll do that. So there are different ones actually, and let me try it. I have, okay, there are different repos. There's the one repo which is focusing just on Datadog. There's the other repo which is focusing on open source. The open source one, it's not public yet because I got to refactor it a little bit before I do. But essentially, the idea is, let me go back to this link here. The idea is to do the following. So when you actually look at these Datadog dashboards, the Datadog dashboards have a bunch of information on here. So this overview dashboard actually not only has cross-plane emitted information, but there's also information from Kubernetes API server. So you can kind of see like, hey, what's the request duration and average for,
do you want to share screen?
Oh, sorry. Let me share it. Yes, absolutely. So this is a flavor of the Datadog dashboards. The Grafana dashboards would be somewhat similar, but the idea here is, so this overview dashboard, it has a combination of like technical information that comes from either kube state metrics and or some cross-plane and provider metrics. In addition to that, there's a sample dashboard here that is more specific to actually the cross-plane and provider metrics. And then there's a higher level dashboard, which is just coming from providers. And here, it's primarily about the managed resources time to readiness. And right now, and so when I did the screenshot, I didn't have a whole lot of stuff going on in the control plane. So some of these panels are empty, but essentially the idea here was, I started with some key AWS providers, right? Like EC2, EFS, EKS, Elasticache, IAM, KMS, and so forth. There are technically 152 of those. And these providers send us how long it took to create a managed resource. And they do that by API group and by kind. And so right now, in this dashboard here, I put I created a different panel for a different API group, right? So this would be the EC2 API group and so forth, right? EKS API group. Inside of it, you would get different data right now for the different kinds. So let's say, if an EC2 API group can have so many different, kind objects. And right now, they're all pretty much in the same panel. It would be interesting to see this in action, on a control plane that has a lot going on. So we can determine whether we need to split up the panels to basically say, oh, this is just for EC2 VPCs, or this is just for EC2, certain things, or whether it makes sense to have them together on the panel. So we think we've got to go through some iterations to see what makes best sense. But that's a start here.
Also, so the first thing I noticed is you can do a lot more with template variables if you add variables that you can switch and nail down, and then you can still put them on one dashboard, but with the variables you can switch between and it's going to change your whole dashboard. That's one thing, but so what you were asking is, so what I'm thinking to do, it is on my to-do list. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, hopefully soon. I'm actually waiting on 114 before I do that, is I want to start running some load testing. So I want to have, like, my first step is to have the dashboards ready,
right.
And more fully featured, as you mentioned. And then my second step is to either find somebody from my company, or I'll do it myself, is to spin up an account and literally, I don't know if you've seen, we did a similar thing with the Argo SIG observability where we tried to break Argo CD. So I wanted to try to do the same thing and see where Crossplane breaks, and just give it, again, as I mentioned, 1,000 resources, 10,000 resources, and see how it behaves, and take screenshots of those dashboards. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think this is super useful. It would be great to also understand the resource use at these different stages, right? So basically, when you throw 1,000 resources at it, and versus 10,000, to see like, actually, ideally, it would be great if you literally increase the resource use in steps of 100, right? Literally from 100 to 10,000, and to have some related information about, like how much memory did the provider consume, or how much CPU did the provider consume, and then also, if you could exercise it through as many different types of resources as possible, right? So we can see, well, is the EC2 provider, when it needs to create, I don't know, 1,000 VPCs, that is that consumption, or is that reconciliation and then the the pressure on the system, is that the same compared to creating 1,000 IAM rules, or 1,000 security groups, or 1,000 of something else, right? Or is there a difference?
Yeah. So depending on what it is, sometimes like it's not going to be like RDS clusters, for example. Those take 20 minutes to come up. So it should be something like a Dynamo. I mean, IAM definitely, because everybody's hitting IAM. We can pick a couple resources, but the requirement is they have to be relatively quick to come up. And that's why I'm saying Dynamo, because I know Dynamo comes up in seconds. It's one of the fastest resources. We can select a few other ones, but like, let's say it cannot be an S3 bucket, because each account has 1,000 S3 buckets limit, and I won't be able to throw 10,000 buckets at it. Even with the 1,000 limit, it's kind of hard to get it to increase to
there's some
1,000.
idea here. When you look at the AWS provider, the official AWS provider, right, the smaller scope ones, there are generated examples. So literally, you could use those examples to readily create the resources. Have you seen that? It's quite cool. So literally, and I wanted to say, so if you, let me see. Yeah, have you seen it? Have you seen the examples in the provider?
I'm not sure which one. I mean, in the provider under examples, or
yeah, let me go and get there, because I think it'll help you. It'll make your task easier. So GitHub Upbound and logging in here. I'll share my screen in a second. So if I go to provider AWS. Okay, so let me go share my screen. So literally, so this is the provider AWS repository. And in here, you have examples and generated examples. If I go into the examples folder, you have examples for all these different resources. And actually, let's make an example, one that I actually recently used. So basically, if you go into the VPC folder, you can literally use this YAML to create the resource. And so all these different APIs and all these different resource kinds, they have examples. And so you could literally use that to create tons of resources in your account. However, and this is where the caveat is, when you do it this way, you're exercising the provider features, right, to do reconciliation and to create the resource, the external resource, and so forth. But what we're not doing using this approach is we're not actually testing any impact on composition creations, right? So what like Crossplane is coordinating the creation of managed resources based on certain readiness states and so forth. And so we do get a lot of great information related to the providers when we're doing that test, which I think is a great first start. What we're not getting yet is we're not getting, impacts on the cross-plane pod when, many compositions are being rendered.
Yeah, I have some good good compositions and nested compositions that I can use to test and throw at the cluster. I can use some of those examples for the managed resources, but again, it will have like, I just want to get the most common ones. I don't want to get like every single, I mean, eventually we can do it with all the providers, but for right now, I want to start with a small subset of list. And I also do have the data of what's most commonly used, like SNS, SQS, S3, Dynamo, these resources, and of course IAM for sure. So just start loading those providers, load testing those providers would be, eventually we want to be able to test every single one of them. But
so I think
that's
great. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
go
great.
ahead.
Thank you so much, Christina. I think that's awesome. I also wonder, would you like to document how you go about testing so other people can look at your document and use the same approach to then maybe test other providers?
Let me see what we have for the.
Right, so you could start with the ones that are most important to you, the most common ones, but then if someone's interested in testing other ones, or maybe even if you do some automation around it, maybe someone could use the automation to test their providers.
Usually if you, I mean, this is the Argo CD one we did. We don't put the exact data, but we're saying like it's, I mean, if somebody wants to reproduce this, they can absolutely do it. It's, we're providing like, this is what I changed in the config map, and then I run the test again. This is the toggle I tuned, and then.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. I think this is awesome. If you do something just for the relevant ones that you think are most useful, that's a really great start. I think I'd love to see the results for that.
Yeah. So baby steps, dashboards. We need the dashboards first.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think if you can start with that and then brief us on progress. This meeting here is every 2 weeks, so if you have some progress in the next 2 weeks, I think that would be awesome. As for me, yeah, go ahead.
Is there any way to move it like either an hour later or either an hour before? Because it's just conflicting with this is the 4th meeting I have on my calendar for this particular time.
Yeah, we can consider moving it. I'll take a look and just let me know. See, so an hour earlier I have conflict, but an hour later, like 10 to 11, I think should be okay. Let me see.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Yeah, I could do it an hour later.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll actually, let me take an action item here. Consider moving the meeting. Maybe 10 a.m. PST. Okay, yeah, that's great. I'll let you know we can do it, but I'll certainly gonna work on that. Then, as for me, similar to this configuration observability Datadog, I'm going to make a public repository available called configuration observability OSS. And that's basically then that this has the Grafana and Prometheus, Crossplane way of installing them, and sample dashboards in there. And then we can add, anything that makes sense to add to that repo. We can take contributions and take PRs and add that. In addition to that, I plan to make an overarching repository available, and that's called configuration observability. And I believe that is where we can add more guidance, right? So the items that you started out with, it's like, hey, what should be monitored? What do I need to look at? What makes best sense, right? So that, I think, can go into the overarching repo, and then any references to specific implementations can also go in there.
Is there any way we can find somebody to work on adding a metric? Just that instead of going and tracking down, right now, like I can tell you, for example, IAM, which is the biggest pinpoint, AWS and CloudWatch, it doesn't expose the API hit rate metric. And only like the EC2 call count is exposed, and it's very hard to find these call counts or API rates. Is there any way we can find, or I don't know if this person has, they have added this metric?
So one thing we're able to do now on the new provider architecture is actually measure the API wait time from making the call to getting a response. And so, it should be easy to translate that into call counts as well.
Yes, if we get that would be, if we can translate it into call counts, it would be awesome. And the wait time, but it's like perfect. Okay, that's coming in 1.14.
That's something. No, that's not in Crossplane. That's in the provider, AWS provider.
40.
It's coming in. No, it's coming in the 1.0.0 release.
Okay.
Which is kind of like, say, a little bit more than a week away.
So I wonder, John, I understand that we have the measurement for the API wait time, but can we expose a counter for the API?
Yeah, I'm sure it should be easy to do.
Okay.
I'll ask the team.
Okay. I'll oops.
You can sign an action to me to
I'll do
have
that.
a look at that.
Yeah. Let me take it out here and let me put it.
You're going to KubeCon?
I plan not to go this year in person. Jean?
I won't be there. I won't make it over this year, unfortunately.
How about you, Jonathan? Are you going to be there?
Not sure yet.
Are you going to be there, Christina?
Yes, I'm going.
Are you talking? Are you speaking?
Not for KubeCon. I wasn't gonna go. My team convinced me I should go this year, but I'm speaking at reInvent, which is, I got my hands full. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Well, maybe you can save I'm kind of like looking forward to Paris next year for KubeCon.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I've never been to Paris.
Is Abound doing the control plane day, the pre-events at Paris?
No idea yet. I think they're just starting to talk about, all the focus is currently on Chicago, so I'm sure they'll start switching gears after November.
Okay. Yes, I am looking forward to Paris as well, as long as they take care of the bed bugs.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, we have some action items. We're almost at time here. We actually, so the meeting was scheduled for 45 minutes. We're a bit over, which is great. So we had a good discussion. And yeah, and I think after these action items, and especially after having some more rich dashboards, I think we can then hone in on what's next, right? Which is specifically like, how do we get users of Crossplane to use all the providers and Crossplane itself with the right resource allocation, so it's just going to be happy, and to tell us when it starts not to be happy, so the users can then adjust the resource allocation accordingly, right? That's a good first step. The next one would be to see, how do we enable them to develop service level objectives, and then supporting service level indicators that will tell them why and when the service level objectives are not going to be met, and how to get them back on track. Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. So looking
Thank you.
forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Is that overlapping with KubeCon?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
So I probably won't see you in 2 weeks. I'll see you
Okay.
in 4 weeks. But also, if you drop me that dashboard, I can we can work on this DM before I publish it, though. If I can grab some of your time, so we can like offline.
Oh yeah, that'll be great.
Review it.
Yeah, I'd love to make progress on it. That'll be great.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Yeah, DM me in the Crossplane Slack, and then we can start a conversation there.
Sounds good. We'll do
Okay.
that.
Awesome. Thanks
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye now.